Let the hero defeat me, and I could go back to my world. I just never imagined my own kid would rush in and take the sword from me. As he was dying, he asked me, "Boss, that world you talked about, where everyone's equal, is it real?" I didn't answer, because from that moment on, I didn't want to go back anymore. 1. The rain was coming down in sheets. I was lying in the ruins of the citadel, staring up at the shattered dome. Rain and blood mixed, running into my eyes. The hero's blade hovered an inch from my throat, its tip dripping blood that pooled in the hollow of my neck, warm and sticky. The system's voice echoed in my head. Host health below 5%. Mission objective defeated by the hero will be completed in approximately 30 seconds. Countdown initiated for return to the real world. 29, 28, 27. I counted along silently. Almost there. 5 years of playing the villain in this hellhole, 5 years of being hunted, and I was finally going home. First thing I do, a long, hot shower, a real meal, not this fantasy world slop, or maybe just sleep for 3 days straight. The hero raised his sword, a golden aura exploding behind him, illuminating the ravaged hall in a blinding flash. He wore the standard issue expression of righteous victory, his mouth moving, probably reciting some pre-canned speech about judgment. I couldn't hear him. 20, 19, 18. Where was Sam? My kid. You should be outside the main hall. I told him to stay far away. He'd been with me for 3 years, a street rat I'd picked up who became the Demon King's right hand. Loyal as a dog, but just as naive. I must have told him 800 times that after this fight was over and I was gone, he should just run, disappear, live his life. He just looked at the floor and mumbled, "Okay," but I don't know if he ever really heard me. 15, 14. The hero's sword began to glow. This was it, the final blow. I closed my eyes, ready for it. It wouldn't hurt. The system would block the pain, just like every other time I'd been forced into defeat. Stop! A raw, desperate scream. It was followed by the sickening thud of a body hitting the stone floor, the sharp crack of breaking bone, and the wet, heavy sound of a blade sinking into flesh. I snapped my eyes open. Blood. So much blood. Warm, thick, and pulsing, it sprayed across my face and chest. Sam's face was right in front of mine, not even a fist length away. His eyes were wide, his mouth still open, the word "stop" seeming to hang in the air around him. Behind him, the hero's sword was run clean through his chest. The tip of the blade emerged from his sternum and plunged into my shoulder, skewering us together on the same length of steel. Sam. My voice felt like it was clawing its way out of someone else's throat. He blinked, and a trickle of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth, dripping onto my cheek. He tried to smile, but the movement sent a racking cough through him, spattering my face with bloody foam. "Be boss." His voice was weaker than a whisper. "Don't talk." I wrapped my arms around him, frantically trying to press my hand over the hole in his chest, but blood just streamed through my fingers, unstoppable. System, heal him. Give me a medkit. Anything. Give it to me, you son of a bitch. Use of healing items on third-party targets is prohibited during mission runtime. To hell with you. I pushed harder against the wound, as if I could somehow shove his life back into his body. Sam's frame trembled in my arms, just like it had 3 years ago. 3 years. It was raining then, too. It was my second year in this godforsaken world. I'd just gotten used to the whole Demon King gig, the universal hatred, the constant threat of death. I was coming back from outside the city, passing an alley, when I heard someone crying. Not a loud wail, but a quiet, choked whimper, like a small animal trying not to be heard. I went to look. In the deepest part of the alley, a kid, nothing but skin and bones, was curled up against a wall, covered in cuts and bruises. His ragged clothes were stuck to his body with drying blood. A few well-dressed thugs were kicking him, sneering gutter rat, filth. That kid was Sam. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe years as a corporate drone had given me a fatal allergy to bullies, but I charged in, beat the hell out of them, and hauled the kid to his feet. "What's your name?" "Don't have one." "Family?" "All dead." "So what's your plan?" He just looked at me, his eyes filled with a kind of resigned calm. "Wait to die, I guess." I didn't say anything. I just dragged him back to the Citadel. From that day on, I had a shadow. I named him Sam, because it was pouring rain the day I found him, and I decided as I counted the seventh raindrop hit his face that I was going to stick my neck out. Boss! Sam's fingers twitched, grabbing weakly at my sleeve. His hands were skeletal, covered in calluses earned over 3 years of pouring my drinks, doing my laundry, polishing my armor. Don't cry. He looked at me, his gaze losing focus, but he was trying so hard to keep his eyes on mine. I'm not in pain, really. My eyes just feel a little heavy. Only then did I realize tears were streaming down my face. Hell, in my 2 lives, over 30 years, when was the last time I cried? When I was 5. 6? You remember the first time we met? His lips twitched, a ghost of a smile, as if remembering something funny. I was curled up in that alley. Some rich guy's goons were kicking the life out of me, and you just came out of nowhere, stood right over me. I knew then my life wasn't worth much, but without you, I'd have been dog food a long time ago. Stop talking. I cupped his face, trying to hide my own expression from him. Shut up. Damn it. You can tell me all this when you're better. Boss. He kept talking, his voice fading with every word. You used to tell me about the place you came from, how there were no nobles, no one to grind you into the dirt, how everyone could stand up straight. Buildings taller than the Citadel, cars that moved without horses, people flying in metal birds, crossing the whole world in a day. Everyone else said you were crazy, but I believed you. His fingers tightened, balling my sleeve into a knot. I always thought, maybe one day I could see it with you. The rain washed a streak of blood from his face, revealing the pale, almost translucent skin beneath. But boss, I never understood. His voice began to tremble. We helped the poor, try to stop the nobles from kicking them around. So how did we become the bad guys? The same nobles who stole my family's farm can just summon a hero whenever they want. All these people screaming about justice. How can't they see that their shining armor and sharp swords are paid for with the blood and sweat of people like us? My mouth opened, but no words came out. What could I say? That this world was just survival of the fittest? That the nobles and heroes were the designated good guys? That people like us were born to be villains? Sam's eyes stared into mine, holding a light I'd never seen before. Boss, that world of yours, is it really real? It's real, I heard myself say, my voice like sandpaper. It's real. That's good. He smiled. A real smile, not a pained grimace. His eyes curved, full of peace. If it's real, then when you go back, could you tell people about us? There's so many others like me, still waiting for a chance to just live. I will, I said, pulling him tighter. I'll go back and I'll tell them. I'll tell them 1,000,000 times, until they never forget. Boss. His eyes slowly began to close. I don't think I'm going to make it to see that day. From now on, you have to take care of yourself. Don't get yourself killed for guys like me. You're not guys like me. I practically roared. You're Sam. You're my kid brother. You're not just some guy. His hand patted my arm, a faint feather-light touch. These hands, they always just held you back. But now, they're finally out of your way. His hand slipped from my arm. My sleeve pulled free from his fingers. The trembling stopped. Sam. I gave him a little shake. Sam. No response. The rain kept falling, pattering against his face, his body, this shell that was no longer warm. I just held him, kneeling in the ruins like a lightning-struck tree. Mission countdown aborted. Host has engaged in hostile action against mission objective hero. Penalty protocol triggered. Mission failed. Re-evaluating host status. To hell with your mission. I looked up. The hero was still standing there, frozen in his lunging pose, his face a mixture of shock, confusion, and a flicker of guilt. Behind him, his party raised their weapons. Demon King, the High Priestess, stepped forward, raising her staff. Your servant is dead. Surrender now. Justice will. She never finished. Because I moved. I don't know how. One moment I was kneeling, the next she was flying through the air, slamming into a stone pillar 30 feet away. Her staff snapped into 3 pieces. She slid to the floor like a broken doll and didn't get up. Demon King. The knight raised his shield, planting himself in front of the hero. I charged. The shield shattered. The knight flew. Then came the ranger. Then the mage. One by one, they fell like wheat before a scythe. The hero stumbled backward, his sword still dripping with Sam's blood. What? What in God's name are you? What am I? I am the Demon King. I am the goddamn Demon King. Netherflame, the one skill the system had always locked away, erupted from my body, and I didn't hesitate for a second. Black fire consumed the great hall, vaporizing the rain, melting stone pillars into glass, and swallowing the hero whole. The screaming lasted 3 seconds. Then there was nothing, only the rain still falling. I walked back to Sam and gathered him into my arms. He was as light as a bundle of dry sticks. His head rested in the crook of my arm, rainwater tracing paths down his cheeks as if he were still crying. Let's go, I told him. Time to go home. Behind me, the system's voice spoke one last time. Critical violation detected. Host's mandatory extraction protocol has been canceled. Penalty protocol permanently enabled. Prepare yourself, host. I ignored it. Outside the citadel, under a sky as black as pitch, the rain fell without end. The entire world was waiting to pass judgment on me. But I no longer cared. The boy in my arms was so light, so cold. He would never open his eyes and call me boss again. But I held him, and I walked forward one step at a time. The citadel was destroyed. It didn't matter. The mission was a failure. It didn't matter. I could never go home. It didn't matter. All those people waiting to see the Demon King fall. All those people screaming their slogans of justice. All those people who built their world on the backs of the poor. None of it mattered anymore. Because starting today, they had a new enemy. Not some guy from another world just trying to get home. Not some actor playing the part of a villain. But a true, walking hell. In the rainy night, I carried Sam into the darkness. Behind me, the burning ruins hissed and smoked in the downpour. Ahead, there was nothing but an endless road. But I would walk it. Carrying the hope he never got to see, I would walk it. I buried Sam on the hill behind the citadel. There's an old oak tree there, one he planted the year he arrived. He said when it grew big, it would be a good place for shade. The sapling was barely up to his waist, and now he was lying under it. There was no coffin. This world didn't do cremation, and I couldn't bring myself to burn him. I dug the grave myself, shovel by shovel, all through the night. By sunrise, the hole was finished, and my hands were raw, the blood staining the shovel's handle dark brown. Before I laid him in, I changed him into a clean set of clothes. His favorite shirt, a simple blue tunic washed so many times it was almost white. He never let me throw it out, said it was comfortable. I straightened his collar and smoothed his sleeves, making it look like he was only sleeping. I knelt by the edge of the grave, looking at his still, placid face. Don't you worry. I remember every word he said. I can't go back to that other world, but I'm going to make the people here see it. I'm going to show them what the kind of life you talked about really looks like. And I'm starting with the ones who owe you a blood debt. I tossed the first shovel of dirt onto his body. The nobles. Every last one of them. A second scoop. The Heroes Guild. Every last one of them. A third. Everyone who climbs to the top by stepping on the little guy. Every last one. The dirt piled higher, slowly covering his face. And finally, I paused, gently placing the last mound of earth over him. I'm going to make this world into the one you dreamed of. And even if I die trying, someone else will pick up where I left off. As I finished the grave, the sun crested the horizon. Golden light spilled over the hillside, onto the little oak tree, onto the small mound of fresh earth. Birds chirped in the distance, and the wind rustled through the grass. I stood before the grave for a long time. Then I turned and walked back down the hill. Below me was the world I was supposed to leave. But now I was staying. 3 days later, the holy city. This was the religious heart of the world, the home of the high priestess I'd killed. In response to her death, the church had issued the highest level of crusade against me, putting a bounty on my head large enough for a normal person to live 10 lifetimes on. So what? I stood on the spire of the tallest cathedral, looking down at the ants crawling below. They were preparing for a grand mass, a service to mourn the dead high priestess and to bless the holy warriors setting out to destroy the demon. A large stage had been built in the main plaza. A cardinal in red robes stood at its center, holding a holy book, his voice droning on. He was surrounded by a sea of kneeling worshippers, their heads bowed, chanting along with him. The sun shone on their faces, each one a mask of piety and holiness. Holiness? I almost laughed. 3 days ago, That holy priestess had pointed her staff at Sam's dead body and declared that justice will prevail. 3 days ago, that holy priestess had watched a sword pierce his heart without a flicker of pity on her face. Justice? I chewed on the word and spat it out. Black fire spread from my feet. The stone of the spire began to melt, flowing like molten glass around me. I raised my hand, fingers spread, and aimed it at the plaza below. Netherflame, Stage 2. Inferno. Black fire rained from the sky. Not a spark, not a wave, but a torrential downpour of black fire that blanketed the entire plaza. The kneeling crowd erupted into screams, scrambling, fleeing, trampling each other in their panic. The cardinal toppled from the stage, his holy book falling into the flames and turning to black ash. I stood on the spire and watched it all, feeling nothing. This wasn't murder. This was payment. A boy named Sam had traded his life for mine. Now, I would make this world pay him back, piece by piece. Starting with the holy city. Starting with the nobles. Starting with every last person who screamed the word justice. A month later, in his castle in the Northlands, Marquis Rexford, one of the 3 great dukes, died. He was the one who had signed the order to clear out Sam's village. Sam's parents starved to death on the road after that order was given. When I found him, he was hiding in a secret chamber, surrounded by his personal guard. They wore the finest armor, carried the sharpest swords, and stood before him, their faces grim with righteous fury. Demon, you will not touch the Marquis. We will defend him to the death. To the death? Fine by me. Where the Netherflame passed, armor melted, swords turned to liquid, and flesh vaporized. Those loyal guards were reduced to piles of black ash before they could even scream. Marquis Rexford cowered in the corner, shaking so violently that the stench of urine filled the small room. What are you? I crouched down, looking him in the eye. What I'm doesn't matter, I said. What matters is whether you remember an eviction order you signed 3 years ago. The one that drove an entire village off their land. His face went pale. Teach those peasants. They couldn't pay their taxes. What good were they? Why you're doing all this for a peasant he didn't finish. I'd already torn out his tongue. Then his eyes. Then his ears. Then his fingers. One by one. I'm not a sadist. I take no pleasure in it. I just believe some debts need to be repaid in a certain way. When I was done, I took his head and mounted it on the main gate of his castle. Beside it, I carve a message into the stone with his own sword. Debts to the people will be paid. 3 months later, the Order of Knights was annihilated. They were the 3rd army of justice sent to kill me. 3,000 strong, fully armored, riding the best war horses, carrying shining banners, and singing hymns as they marched into Blackwood Ridge. Not one of them returned. That night, I stood in a sea of blood and bodies, looking at the carnage, and I remembered something Sam had said. All these people screaming about justice, how can't they see that their shining armor and sharp swords are paid for with the blood and sweat of people like us? Now they saw it, in their own blood. 6 months later, I finally did something I never dared to before. I brought Sam back. One of the forbidden powers of the Demon King was a dark art called the Soulless Return. It could resurrect the dead, but at a terrible cost. It brought back the body, but not the soul. No memories, no emotions. Just a walking, empty shell. I knew the cost. I did anyway. That night, I stood before Sam's grave. I burned away the earth with Netherflame and unearthed his bones. They were blackened by the soil, but still held his shape. I laid them out, piece by piece, and began the ritual. The incantation took all night. As the sun rose, he was standing before me. The same face, thin and pale. The same large eyes, the same slightly chapped lips. He was wearing the blue tunic I'd buried him in, standing in a morning light like a freshly planted sapling. Sam, I called to him. He turned his head and looked at me. No recognition. No smile. Not the familiar call of boss. Just a look. His eyes were vacant, empty. Do you know who I am? He tilted his head, as if processing the words. Then, slowly he spoke. Master. The voice was the same, the cadence the same, even the way he formed the word was the same. But it wasn't him. My Sam called me boss. My Sam would smile before he spoke, his eyes curving into little crescent moons. My Sam would never look at me with such empty eyes. I stood there, staring at this perfect, hollow replica, and felt the strength drain out of me. "Are you hungry?" I heard myself ask. He considered it, then shook his head. "The undead do not require sustenance." The undead. Right. He was one of the undead. Not a person, not Sam, just an empty shell wearing his skin. I turned away so he wouldn't see my face. "Let's go," I said. "Home." He followed behind me, his footsteps just as light as they had been in life. But I knew. The boy who used to bounce on his toes, tugging my sleeve and asking, "Boss, what's for dinner?" was never coming back. That night, I sat in the ruins of the Citadel, watching the empty shell of Sam sit motionless in a corner, and I started to laugh. And then the tears came. Sam's last words echoed in my head, one after another. "My life wasn't worth much, but without you, I'd have been dog food a long time ago. I always thought, maybe one day I could see it with you. There are so many others like me, still waiting for a chance to just live. These hands, they always just held you back. But now, they're finally out of your way." I cover my face with my hands, my shoulders shaking. From the corner, the husk of Sam turned his head, his vacant eyes watching me, as if he couldn't comprehend what his master was doing. Of course he couldn't. How could he understand? He was just a corpse. After that day, I stopped trying to awaken his memories. I just started taking him with me. When I slaughtered a noble, he watched from the side. When I burned a church, he followed behind me. When an army came to kill me, he stood by my side, a silent shadow. People started to whisper that the Demon King had gone mad, that he kept a dead man as his servant. Others said he was cursed, that the corpse was the physical manifestation of his obsession. And still others said a monster like him would eventually be put down by a new hero. Let them talk. All I knew was that every night, when I looked over my shoulder and saw that thin figure in the blue tunic standing in the darkness, the gaping hole in my chest didn't ache quite so much. I knew it wasn't him, but at least it looked like him. A year passed, then 2, then 5. I lost count of how many years went by. My name became the world's waking nightmare. Nobles trembled when they heard it. The church's priests fainted at its mention. The common folk who heard it, well, some were afraid, some were confused, and some, in secret, felt a flicker of light in their eyes. That light reminded me of Sam. Strange rumors began to circulate. It seems like the Demon King only kills the nobles who abuse the common folk. The churches he burns, they're always the ones that bleed the people dry with tithes. The Demon King. Some people started burning incense for me in secret. Others started painting a symbol on their walls, a strange pattern that outsiders wouldn't understand, but that every commoner recognized instantly. The mark of a sanctuary. In places with that mark, nobles didn't dare enter, and the church stayed away. I didn't know about any of this. Or rather, I didn't care. I just kept walking from one place to the next, with a husk of Sam at my side, killing those who deserved to be killed and burning what deserved to be burned. Until the day a new hero stood before me. 3. Demon King. The young man held his sword high, his voice booming, his face flushed with a mixture of fear and determination. Behind him, a few companions of the same age stood, their hands trembling slightly. "Today I, Ryan, in the name of the Heroes Guild, have come to defeat you." A hero. Another hero. I looked at him and almost felt like laughing. Once a hero stood before me, in the same pose, speaking the same words. Then he killed Sam. Years later, another hero stood before me, in a similar pose, with similar words. Then he died, and now another one. This world was like a video on a loop. The heroes changed, but the script was always the same. Justice will prevail. The Demon King must be defeated. Light will conquer darkness. If only they knew what real darkness was. "Do you know how the last hero died?" I asked him. He flinched, his grip tightening on his sword. "Edo, you killed him with your dark magic." "Dark magic?" I smiled. He chose his own end. The hero from 5 years ago, his name was Alan. He was a cut above the first one. At least he didn't immediately kill my sidekick. But he had a bad habit of standing on his moral high ground and judging everyone else. "Demon King," he had yelled, "you have slaughtered the innocent. Your sins are unforgivable." "Who did I slaughter?" "You killed the High Priestess. You killed Marquis Rexford. You've killed countless innocents." The High Priestess was innocent. She watched my friend get murdered and didn't even blink. That was a righteous judgment. Marquis Rexford was innocent. His orders starve an entire village to death. That was a matter of lawful taxes. Those knights were innocent. They used the people's money to buy their armor and horses, then came to kill the one person standing up for those people. They were carrying out a divine crusade. I was done arguing with him. I pointed behind him. Look over there. He turned. A whole village of people was standing on the hillside. They were dressed in rags, gaunt and malnourished, but their eyes were burning with a frightening intensity. They were looking at me like I was a miracle. They're the survivors from Marquis Rexford's lands, I said. Go ask them if he deserved to die. Alan's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The villagers fell to their knees and began to bow their heads to the ground. Lord Demon, thank you. You are our savior, Lord Demon. The color drained from Alan's face. His sword felt too heavy to lift. The slogans died in his throat. His entire belief system shattered right there, in front of those kneeling villagers. I put him out of his misery, and now this young man, Ryan, was standing where Alan had stood, looking exactly the same. The people you killed, maybe not all of them deserve to die, he said, his voice trembling but firm. But some of the people you didn't kill died because of you. I narrowed my eyes. What do you mean? The Northlands, he said, his gaze locked on mine. You killed Marquis Rexford, and his territory was carved up by the neighboring lords. The new rulers were even crueler than he was. The villagers thought they had a savior, but all they got was a worse disaster. Did you know that? Because of your sword, 300 more people died. I said nothing. The Western Church, he continued. You destroyed the holy city, and the church fractured into 3 warring factions. The poor who used to survive on church charity were abandoned. Twice as many froze to death last winter than in any year before. The wind picked up, carrying a chill. The families of the nobles you slaughtered fled to other lands, where they were taken in. To get revenge on you, their new hosts began hunting down the people you protected. For every one of them you killed, they killed 10 commoners in retaliation. I stood motionless. Ryan looked at me, and his eyes held something complex, not hatred, not fear, but a kind of sorrow. Demon King, I know you're not pure evil. I heard what happened to your friend. I've heard about the good you've done for the common folk. But this way of yours. He took a deep breath. Can you kill them all? I looked up at him. This kid was smarter than I'd given him credit for. But he was still too young. Everything you just said. I began, my voice low. I already knew. He froze. You knew. What did you think? I walked slowly toward him, the husk of Sam trailing behind me, his footsteps echoing in the ruins. I killed the Marquis, and I knew a new one would take his place. I burned the holy city, and I knew the church would splinter. So what? So what? He shot back, his voice rising. All those people died. Were those people really living before? I cut him off. He was speechless. In Rexford's lands, those villagers were already starving. The new lord is crueler, yes, but at least now they know who to hate. Before, they thought Rexford was a benevolent master, that the church was their savior. They were being bled dry while bowing in gratitude. Now, at least they understand. There are no saviors. You can only save yourself. Ryan's expression flickered. Church charity? I sneered. The food they handed out was what they'd taken from the people in the first place. The church supported thousands of priests in luxury, eating the finest food, wearing the finest robes, and then doled out a bowl of thin soup to make the people grateful. Now that the charity is gone, they have to find their own way. You think that's a bad thing? He didn't answer. And the families of the nobles I killed, I said, stopping directly in front of him, staring into his eyes. They fled and took revenge on the commoners. And what do you think those commoners will do? Just wait to be slaughtered? Or will they band together and drive those bastards out? Ryan took a step back. I'm not getting revenge, I said. I'm flipping the table. The wind howled, whipping the words from my mouth. The nobles have been sitting at this table for 300 years. The church has been sitting at this table for 300 years. The heroes have been sitting at this table for 300 years. And the common folk have been on the floor, eating the scraps. I just flipped the damn table over. When the table flips, people get hit by flying plates, people get burned by hot soup, people scramble to grab what they can. That's chaos. But for the first time, the people on the floor have a chance to stand up. Ryan stared at me, his expression a chaotic mess. Doing this, so many people will die. If I don't, even more will die. I turned and walked back toward the heart of the ruins. Hero, I remember what you said today, but you're not ready to kill me yet. Go train for a few more years. When you figure things out, come back. He yelled after me, I will. I swear I'll defeat you. I just waved a hand, not looking back. The husk of Sam followed, his footsteps as quiet as falling leaves. That was the first time I met Ryan. I didn't know then that this young man would change everything. That night, I sat on the hillside, looking down at the small village below. It was Sam's old hometown. It had been abandoned for years, but recently, I'd started seeing smoke rising from the chimneys again. A few groups of refugees had found their way here, clearing the land, planting crops, starting over. The husk of Sam sat beside me, motionless. You know, I said suddenly, that hero today, he was right about some things. No response. Killing people does cause collateral damage, but there's no other way. I watched the lights flicker on in the valley below, my voice dropping. There's no perfect solution in this world. You just pick a path and live with the consequences. The wind rustled his tunic, the faded blue fabric fluttering in the dark. Sam, I said softly. He turned his head, his empty eyes fixing on me. It's nothing. I managed a small smile. I just wanted to say your name. He didn't respond, but I didn't mind. I was used to it by now. The lights in the village went out, one by one. The night breeze carried the scent of earth and grass. I closed my eyes and remembered a time, long ago, when the real Sam was alive, sitting right here beside me. He wouldn't say anything, and I wouldn't either. We'd just sit like that for hours. Once, I asked him what he was thinking about. He said, I'm thinking about that world you described, boss. Which one? The one where everyone's equal. The one with tall buildings and fast cars and metal birds in the sky. I laughed. That's just daily life for us. Nothing special. He looked at me with such seriousness. It might be daily life for you, boss, but for people like us, it's a dream we couldn't even imagine. I didn't think much of it then, but looking back now, he was right. What is mundane for some is a dream that others would die for. Soon, I whispered to myself. Soon. For the second time Ryan came, it was 3 years later. He still looked the same, young, intense fire in his eyes. But something was different. His steps were heavier, more grounded. The hand on his sword was steady. And the fear in his eyes when he looked at me was gone, replaced by something else. Demon King. He stopped at the edge of the ruins, his voice calm. I'm here as promised. I walked out from the rubble, the husk of Sam behind me. When Ryan saw Sam, his pupils contracted for a split second, but he didn't say a word. Finish your training? I have. Figured things out? He paused for a moment, then nodded. I figured some things out. Tell me. He took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. Flipping the table. You were right to do it. I raised an eyebrow. But in these last 3 years, I've seen the people who died because that table was flipped. People who starved, who froze, who were killed by roving soldiers or trampled by refugee mobs. His voice was raw. The death toll, it's higher than the last decade combined. I remained silent. But I saw something else too, he went on. The people who survived, they're different. How are they different? They've started thinking for themselves, Ryan said. They used to rely on the nobles, but the nobles are gone. They used to rely on the church, but the church is gone. They only have themselves. I saw one village. No lord, no priest. The villagers elected a council of elders to manage things. They decide what to plant, how to distribute water, who stands watch. Their lives are harder than before, but their faces... He paused. There's a light in their eyes. The wind kicked up a cloud of dust between us. I looked at the young man before me and suddenly understood how he'd survived these past 3 years. Other heroes had either been killed by me or choked on their own justice. But he was different. He was willing to look, to think, and to admit what he saw. So, I asked, are you here to thank me? No. He tightened his grip on his sword. I'm here to stop you. Oh, flipping the table was right. But now, you're just killing for the sake of killing. His eyes bored into mine. 3 years ago, you said you were doing it so the people on the floor could stand up. But now, how many of the nobles you kill are actually oppressing anyone? How many of the churches you burn are actually bleeding the people dry? I didn't answer. You know it too, don't you? His voice softened. You're just lashing out. His words were a dull knife, twisting in my gut. I looked at him, at those clear, honest eyes, and was suddenly reminded of someone else. Years ago, someone else had looked at me with that same expression. Back then, he had asked me, "Boss, we're just trying to help poor people get by. How do we become the villains?" That boy's eyes had been brighter than Ryan's, cleaner, without all these complex emotions. They held only simple curiosity and pure, unwavering trust. "What do you know?" I muttered. "I know about your friend." Ryan glanced at the husk of Sam behind me. "I know how he died, and I know what you did afterward. But that's not a reason to keep killing forever." My fingers twitched. "No matter how many people you kill, he's not coming back." "Shut up. He died, and you blame yourself. So you're punishing yourself this way." I said, "Shut up." Netherflame exploded from my body, surging toward Ryan. He jumped back, raising his sword to block, but the force still sent him tumbling, rolling through the dirt. He pushed himself up, wiping a smear of blood from his mouth, and looked at me. "I'm not going to fight back," he said. "I didn't come here to fight you today. I just came to tell you that you've changed." I stood my ground, the black fire churning around me, warping the very air. "You used to kill so that others could live. Now, you kill because you can't live with yourself." After saying his piece, he turned to leave. He took a few steps, then stopped. "I'll be back in 3 months," he said, without looking back. "And when I come, I'll bring real strength with me. Not to kill you, but to end all of this." His figure disappeared beyond the ruins. I stood there for a long, long time. The husk of Sam walked up and stood beside me, his empty eyes gazing in the direction Ryan had gone. "He's right," I said to him, my voice barely a whisper. "I have changed." No response. I turned and walked back into the depths of the citadel. That night, I had a dream. In the dream, Sam was alive. We were sitting on the hillside next to the old oak tree. The sun was warm on his face, and he was squinting, a happy smile playing on his lips. "Boss," he said, turning to me, "how come you're not out killing anyone today?" "I'm done," I said. "So what's next?" "Next?" I hesitated, unsure what to say. He scooted closer, tugging my sleeve. "Can we go see that world you told me about?" "We can't go back." "Then let's build one here." He blinked his big, bright eyes. "Just like you said, where everyone's equal, where no one gets pushed around. We can build it together." I looked at him, at those shining eyes, and felt a lump form in my throat. "Okay," I said. Then I woke up. I opened my eyes to the broken dome of the citadel, to shattered stone and shafts of moonlight. The husk of Sam sat in the corner, motionless. The moonlight illuminated a face identical to the one in my dream, but the eyes were empty. I lay there for a long time, just staring at that face. Then I got up and walked out of the ruins. Outside, the moon was huge and perfectly round, bathing the hillside in a silver light. The old oak tree was still there, much taller now, its branches casting a wide shadow over Sam's grave. Someone had placed a few wildflowers on the grave, small white and yellow blossoms, swaying gently in the moonlight. I crouched down and looked at the flowers. Who put them here? The nearby villagers? Someone he had helped, somewhere along the way? I didn't know. But seeing those flowers, the knot that had been tied in my chest for 10 years loosened just a little. I picked up the smallest one and tucked it into my coat. Then I stood up and whispered to the grave. "Just a little longer. It's almost time." The wind rustled the leaves of the oak tree, as if in reply. In the days that followed, I changed. I stopped seeking out fights, stopped killing on sight. When a crusade came for me, I drove them away if I could, try not to kill unless I had to. When the occasional travelers stumbled into my ruins, I just told them to leave, too tired to even bother. The husk of Sam was always there, a shadow at my heels. Sometimes I would talk to him, telling him stories about the past, about when the real Sam was alive. He couldn't understand, of course, but he would listen, occasionally making a soft sound, as if responding. I knew it wasn't him, but talking helped just a little. 5 had happened not long after Ryan's second visit. An old man came to the citadel. He was dressed in rags, his hair was completely white, and his back was stooped. He walked with a tremor, as if he might fall at any moment. But when he stood before the ruins, his posture was straight, and his eyes were bright. "Lord Demon," he said, his voice raspy. "I've come to thank you." I watched him, saying nothing. He slowly lowered himself to his knees and bowed his head to the ground 3 times. "Years ago, you killed Marquis Rexford and saved our village. Then the new Lord came, crueler than the last, and we couldn't survive. We fled north, but were driven away again. 3 years ago, you passed through our new settlement and saved us once more. This old life of mine, you're the one who gave it to me. I remembered. 3 years ago, I did pass a village where some refugees were being hunted by a local noble. I dealt with it on my way through. A trivial matter at the time, just another day. Get up, I said. He shakily rose to his feet and pulled a cloth bundle from his robes, holding it out with both hands. This is a small token from our entire village. Please accept it. I took it and unwrapped the cloth. Inside were a few hunks of stale bread, hard as rocks, clearly something they had saved for a long time. There was also a small doll sewn from rags. The craftsmanship was crude, but it was recognizably a figure in a black robe, with a strange symbol stitched on its chest. That is you, the old man said, pointing at the doll. Every family in our village has one. We pray to it before we sleep, asking for your blessing. I was stunned. Praying to me? You killed the nobles who hurt us. You destroyed the churches that bled us dry. You gave us a path to survive, the old man said. We have nothing to repay you with, except this. I stared at the little rag doll, a strange feeling blooming in my chest. When I was just trying to complete the mission, all I wanted was to go home. After Sam died, all I wanted was to burn the world down. I never imagined someone would worship me like a god. You people, I started but didn't know what to say. The old man looked at me, his cloudy eyes holding an unreadable expression. Lord Demon, please don't grieve too much, he said softly. We all know about what happened to your young friend. My fingers tightened around the doll. He died for you. We've all heard the story. He was a good boy. He did you proud. As he spoke, the old man pulled something else from his robes. The children of our village made this for you. It was a small wooden carving. It fit in the palm of my hand, a carving of a person, a young man, thin, wearing a simple tunic and holding a sword. The carving was rough, but it captured an essence, the corners of the mouth tilted up in a slight smile. The children said, "This is your friend." They never met him, but they heard the adults tell his story, and they wanted to make something in his image to keep you company. I took the carving, my thumb gently tracing the lines of the face. Rough but warm, just like Sam's face when he was alive, always ready with a smile. Thank you, I said, my voice hoarse. The old man bowed his head one more time, then shakily turned and walked away. I stood outside the ruins, watching his back disappear into the distance, and didn't move for a long time. The husk of Sam stood beside me, his empty eyes also looking in that direction. I looked down at the wooden figure in my hand, then at the empty shell beside me, and a strange thought occurred to me. Sam was dead, but maybe he wasn't gone. The traces he left behind, the things he did, the people he moved, they were still alive. They remembered him, thought of him, carved his likeness in wood, told his story to their children. Was this the first step toward equality? I carefully placed the wooden carving in my coat, next to the dried wildflower. Then I clapped the husk of Sam on the shoulder. Let's go. He made a soft sound and fell in a step behind me. 6 Ryan actually moved in. He came back 3 months later as promised, and when he saw I wasn't going to kill him, he just found a corner in the ruins and set up camp. At first, I figured he wouldn't last 3 days. He was a kid, all passion and ideals. When faced with actual hardship, who could blame him for leaving? But he made it through the first month. The ruins had nothing. He slept under the open sky, huddling under a slab of stone when it rained. Food was even worse. I didn't need to eat, but he had to forage. He scoured the nearby mountains for every edible root and berry. Catching a rabbit was cause for celebration. I left him alone. He didn't bother me. Every day I'd go out on my patrols, and he'd just follow me, never saying a word. The husk of Sam walked on my left, he walked on my right, like 2 bodyguards. Sometimes I would stop and just look down at the villages in the valley. He'd stop too, following my gaze. One day, he finally spoke. You do this often? Yeah. What are you looking at? How they live. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I saw a woman raising 3 kids by herself on a tiny plot of land. Her husband was conscripted and died in some war. I didn't reply. She's up before dawn and still working after the moon rises. The oldest kid takes care of the younger ones, who just crawl around in the dirt. I've never seen her smile. I turned to look at him. He was also looking down at the valley, his expression complex. But she's alive, he said. She's fighting to live. Every day she works. Every day she finds food for her children. Every day she just keeps going. I turned my gaze back to the valley. That's what living is, I said. Don't you find it tragic? Do you find it pitiful? I countered. He thought about it, then shook his head. Not pitiful. He searched for the right word. It's admirable. I grew up in the church, never had to worry about food or clothing, and spent all my time yelling about saving the world. But them? They have no one to save them. They can only save themselves. The fact that they survive, that's harder than killing 10 nobles. I looked at him and thought, this kid really is different. Other heroes see the common folk and think, I must protect them. He saw them and thought, they're stronger than I am. You learn fast, I said. He blinked, then a smile broke across his face. Are you teaching me? I'm not teaching you anything. But what you just said, that was a lesson. I ignored him and kept walking. He followed behind, and I could hear the smile in his footsteps. That night, something happened. Bandits attacked the village down in the valley. A group of desperate refugees, probably starving, looking to steal food. A few dozen of them, armed with farming tools and clubs, stormed the village under the cover of darkness. I saw it from the hillside. Ryan saw it too. You're not going? He asked me. No. He gave me a long look, said nothing, grabbed his sword, and charged down the hill. I watched him go, feeling a strange twist in my gut. This kid, he knew I wouldn't go, but he went anyway. Alone, against a few dozen men. Did he think he could win? Then I remembered. He was a hero. Isn't this what heroes do? I didn't go down, but I watched from the hill. I watched him cut down 7 or 8 of them, one-on-one. I watched him get surrounded, watched him take wound after wound. I watched him carve a bloody path through them, shielding the villagers as they fled toward the back of the village. And I watched as, at the last moment, a club came down on his head, and he fell. I moved. When I came to my senses, I was standing in the middle of the bandits. Netherflame was pouring out of me, and their screams echoed through the night as they scattered and fled. Ryan was on the ground, his head covered in blood, but his eyes were open. You came. He managed a weak, bloody smile. Shut up. I hauled him to his feet. You're not dying on me. Of course not. He coughed. You haven't finished teaching me yet. I threw him over my shoulder and started walking back to the ruins. Behind me, the villagers were shouting something, but I couldn't make it out. Ryan was still mumbling, slumped over my shoulder. See, I knew you'd come. Shut up. You could deny it all you want, but that friend of yours, he taught you well. My steps faltered for a second. He made you see that people are more important than missions, more important than going home, more important than anything. I didn't answer. I just carried him one step at a time, back the way we came. The husk of Sam followed behind, his footsteps as quiet as falling leaves. That night, I dressed Ryan's wounds. My technique was clumsy. It had been a decade since I'd done anything like it. But he was tough. He'd live. He lay on a pile of straw, watching me work, and then he asked a question out of the blue. When he died, what were you thinking? My hands paused. You don't have to answer, he said quickly. I tied off the bandage and sat down beside him, looking out at the moon. I wasn't thinking anything, I said. My mind was just blank. When I came to, they were all dead. He was quiet for a moment. Do you ever regret it? Regret what? Killing them. I looked at the moon, thinking for a long time. No, I said, but sometimes I wonder if I hadn't let Sam come with me that day, or if I had sent him away sooner, if things would have been different. Would they have been? No. I turned to look at him. He was the kind of person who, once he made up his mind, you couldn't change it. Ryan smiled. Just like you. I didn't respond. Moonlight streamed into the ruins, falling on the husk of Sam. He sat in the corner, his empty eyes looking in our direction. Ryan followed my gaze, was silent for a moment, and then said something unexpected. He's still here, you know. What? I mean, your friend, he said, looking at me earnestly. He lives inside you. The things he said, the things he did, the person he made you become, that's all real. I just stared at him. This one here. He gestured to the husk of Sam. He's the part of your past you can't let go of. But the real person, you never lost him. A cool breeze snaked through a crack in the ruined wall. I looked down at my own hands. These hands had killed so many, were stained with so much blood. But they had also wiped away Sam's tears, bandaged his cuts, picked wild berries for him from the mountainside. Get some sleep, I said, standing up. We have work to do tomorrow. What work? You wanted to learn, didn't you? Class starts tomorrow. Ryan blinked, then a wide grin spread across his face, like a kid who'd just been given a piece of candy. Okay. That night, I sat outside the ruins, watching the moon and thinking about many things. I thought about the first time Sam called me boss. I thought about him dying in my arms. I thought about the path I'd walked these past years, the people I'd killed, the things I'd seen. And I thought about what Ryan had said. He lives inside you. Maybe that skinny kid never really left. Maybe he became a part of me, the reason for what I do, my only anchor in this world. As the sun began to rise, I stood up and dusted myself off. The husk of Sam walked over and stood beside me. Let's go, I said. Time to get to work. He made a soft sound. Behind me, Ryan emerged from the ruins, rubbing his eyes. What's the lesson for today? I'm going to teach you how to kill, I said. And I'm going to teach you how not to. He looked confused for a second, then he smiled. How are you going to teach that? One day at a time. I started walking. Behind me, 2 sets of footsteps followed. One as light as a falling leaf, the other as heavy as a stone. But they were both there, and they were both with me. Continued in parts 7 to 10. Due to the length, the adaptation has been split. The following sections continue and complete the story arc. 7. Ryan was a good student. Not a brilliant one, but a diligent one. He listened to everything I said. Then he'd go off and think about it. If he didn't understand, he'd ask. Then he'd think some more. If once wasn't enough, he'd try 10 times. After 3 months, his swordsmanship hadn't improved much, but his understanding of the world had changed completely. I used to think justice was about punishing bad guys, he told me one day. Now I see that sometimes, even after you get rid of the bad guys, the good people still can't survive. I was sharpening a sword and looked up at him. For instance, that village to the west, he said, sitting on a rock, frowning. When we were there last, there was an old man. His son was drafted by the local lord and died on some battlefield. We killed that lord later, but his son isn't coming back. The old man is all alone. He can't make it. I said nothing. So what's the right answer here? He asked, looking at me. Did that lord deserve to die? Yes. But did killing him bring the old man's son back? No. I put the sword down and looked at him. But you're saying we shouldn't have killed him? No. He shook his head. I'm saying that just killing isn't enough. After you kill, someone has to take care of the people left behind. Otherwise, they won't survive either. I nodded. So who takes care of them? He was stumped. After a moment, he said uncertainly, the hero. How many heroes are there? Not many. And how many villages can one hero take care of? He fell silent. I went back to sharpening the sword. When you were with the church, how did they handle it? He thought for a moment. The church would give out food, take in orphans, provide healing for the sick. Where did the food come from? Donations from the faithful. And where did the faithful get their money? He froze again. I answered for him. The faithful got their money from the fields they plowed, the cloth they wove, the firewood they chopped. The church took their donations, then used a tiny fraction of it to give charity to people who were even poorer. What do you call that? His mouth hung open. It's called wealth redistribution, I said. It doesn't solve the fundamental problem. Then what is the fundamental problem? I looked at the distant mountains, silent for a long moment. The fundamental problem is that some people do no work, but eat the best food. And some people work themselves to death, but eat the worst. The church and the nobles are the ones who don't work. The common folk are the ones who do. And the heroes? Heroes were supposed to protect the common folk, but eventually the church co-opted them, and they became part of the group that doesn't work either. Ryan's face paled. I continued. You used to eat the church's food, wear their clothes, use their equipment. Where did all that come from? The common folk gave it. They gave it to you hoping you would protect them. But did you? He looked down at his feet. You protected the church. When someone couldn't pay their tithe, you enforced it. When someone rebelled against a noble, you crushed them. You called it justice, but all you were really doing was upholding a system where the people who do nothing get everything. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Then he looked up, and there was a light in his eyes I had never seen before. And you, he asked, why do you kill? To flip the table. And after it's flipped? I looked at him, and for the first time, a real smile touched my lips. That's the next lesson. 3 months later, on a moonlit night, Ryan was sitting outside the ruins, watching the sky, when he suddenly asked a question. Boss, have you ever thought about going back? I was drinking some water, and my hand froze. Back where? To the place you came from, he said, turning to look at me. You told me you were from another world. One where everyone's equal, with tall buildings and fast cars and metal birds in the sky. I stared at the moon, saying nothing. Have you ever thought about going back? Had I? Of course I had. For the first few years, it was all I thought about. It was all I dreamed about. I dreamed of my tiny studio apartment, of the food truck downstairs, of the time clock in my office, of all the pointless meetings and deadlines. Back then, I would have done anything to go back. Then Sam died, and I never thought about it again. Can't go back, I said. But what if you could? I turned to look at him. He was watching me, his expression as earnest and clear as a child's. If there was a chance right now for you to go home, would you take it? I was silent. The moonlight washed over the ruins, painting everything in shades of silver. The husk of Sam sat in his corner, his empty eyes also turned toward me, as if waiting for my answer. I thought for a long, long time. Then I spoke slowly. I just want to go back, more than anything. But now, I paused. Now, there are things here I can't leave behind. A spark lit up in Ryan's eyes. Like what? I didn't answer, just looked over the husk of Sam. He followed my gaze. Him? He asked, surprised. But he's... Not him. I cut him off. What he left behind. What? The things he said. The things he did. The world he made me see. I looked up at the moon, my voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. He said he wanted to see what a world where everyone was equal looked like. He didn't get to, so I have to see it for him. Ryan was quiet. After a long moment, he said softly, "You really miss him." I didn't answer. The wind blew through the ruins, rustling the collar of the husk's blue tunic. What's the point of missing him? I stood up and brushed the dust from my clothes. He's not coming back. All I can do is move forward. Forward to where? I don't know. I looked at the dark mountains in the distance. But if you walk long enough, you'll get there eventually. That night, I had a dream. In the dream, I was standing in a strange place. All around me were tall buildings, so tall they scraped the sky, higher than any mountain in this world. Cars zipped by on the streets, moving without horses. Metal birds soared overhead, their engines roaring. I stood on the sidewalk, looking at it all. It felt familiar, yet alien. Was this my world? Someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around. It was Sam. He was wearing his blue tunic, a smile on his face. His eyes were curved into crescents, shining and bright, exactly as they had been when he was alive. "Boss," he said. My mouth opened, but no words came out. He stepped closer, tugging my sleeve. "Is this the world you told me about?" "Yes." He looked up at the tall buildings, at the fast cars, at the metal birds, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's amazing," he said. "Even better than you described." I looked at him and noticed something. He didn't look like someone who had been dead for 10 years. He was still so young, so clean, as if he had just left yesterday. He turned back to me. "You've worked so hard, boss." I froze. "I've been watching all these years," he said with a smile. "Everything you've done. The people you killed, the people you saved, this hero you've been teaching. I know all of it. I never left." He pointed at my chest. "I'm right here." I looked down at my chest, but there was nothing there. When I looked up, he was still there, his smile unchanged. "You should go back, boss," he said. "There are people over there waiting for you now." "Waiting for what?" "Waiting for you to lead them, to show them that world." He blinked. "Even if I can't see it with my own eyes, as long as you see it, it's like I'm seeing it too." I looked at him, and my eyes began to sting. "Sam." "Boss." He stepped forward and gave me a quick, gentle hug. It was light, so light like a feather landing on my shoulder. Then he stepped back, smiled, and waved. "I'm going now. Don't be sad. I'm always with you." His form began to fade, turning translucent, until he dissolved into the air. I stood on the empty street corner. The tall buildings were still there. The cars still zipped by. The metal birds still roared overhead. But he was gone. I opened my eyes. The moonlight was cool on my face. The husk of Sam sat in his corner, his empty eyes watching me. I lay there for a long time, just looking at his face. Ryan started helping me. Not with killing, with saving people. In the last 3 years, more and more groups of refugees had started to appear. The oppressed were finally starting to stand on their own. They fled from all over the kingdom, settling near Blackwood Ridge, clearing land, building villages. The number of settlements in the valley grew, but with more people came more hardship. They couldn't survive on their own. So Ryan went from village to village, helping them build shelters, teaching them how to farm, bringing them medicine. Sometimes I'd go with him, not to help, just to see if the people who had survived were doing okay. One of the villages had been rebuilt by the people from Sam's old hometown. When I went, I saw a wooden sign at the village entrance. Carved into it were 2 words, Sam's Creek. I stood in front of that sign for a long time. Ryan stood beside me, quiet. After a moment, he said softly, "They named it. They said your friend was a good person, and he should be remembered." I stared at the sign, at the crude, crooked letters, and I felt something slowly filling the hole that had been in my chest for 10 years. "Let's go," I said. "Where?" "Inside. Let's take a look." The people in the village saw me and were at first terrified, then overjoyed. Then they all fell to their knees and started bowing. I told them to get up. A little girl ran up to me, holding a small rag doll, identical to the one I'd received before. She held it up, tilting her head back to look at me. "Are you the Lord Demon?" "I am." "Then do you know Brother Sam?" I looked into her eyes. They were as bright as Sam's had been. "I do." "What was he like?" I crouched down to her level. "He was a very good person," I said. "He was a better man than me." She tilted her head, not quite understanding. I smiled and stood up. "I'll tell you all about him when you're older." Then I turned and left. Ryan caught up to me. "What you just said, what about it? You said you'd tell her when she's older." He looked at me. "You're not leaving?" I looked at the mountains in the distance and thought for a long time. "I can't," I said. "There's too much here I can't leave behind." He blinked, and then he smiled. It was the first time I had ever seen him smile with such pure, unadulterated joy. 3 months later, something happened. An army came from the north. Not a noble's army, a people's army. All the people who had been oppressed by the nobles, abandoned by the church, and hunted by the heroes had banded together. They had formed their own army. They didn't have fine armor or sharp weapons, but they had one thing, the will to no longer live on their knees. They took one city, then another. The nobles' armies fled before them. The church's priests surrendered without a fight. They fought their way across the land, all the way to the borders of Blackwood Ridge. Then they sent someone to find me. Lord Demon. The messenger was a young man with a scar on his face, but his eyes were bright. "We are the people you saved. We are from Sam's Creek. We'd like to invite you to see what we've built." I went. The city was called Blackstone, formerly a noble's fortress. Now, a new flag flew from its walls. It wasn't a noble's crest or a church cross. It was a single hand, reaching upward. "This is our banner," the scarred young man said. "It means we no longer live on our knees. We will hold up our own sky." I stood beneath the city walls, looking at that flag, looking at the ragged but determined people, and I remembered something Sam had said so many years ago. There are so many others like me, still waiting for a chance to just live. They had been waiting. Now, they weren't waiting anymore. They were taking it for themselves. That night, I sat with the leaders of this new army, listening to them talk. One spoke of how they took the first city, another of how to distribute food, another of how to fight back against the nobles' counterattacks, another of how to win the trust of the common folk. They spoke over each other. Their plans were a mess, but every single one of them had a fire in their eyes. I had seen that fire before. I had seen it in Sam's eyes. I had seen it in the eyes of the people he had saved. I had seen it in the eyes of the people who rebuilt his village. And now, I saw it in the eyes of this group. Ryan was sitting beside me. He leaned over and whispered, "See? This is the result of you flipping the table." I looked at them, saying nothing. But I knew he was right. That night, I made a decision. 9, I'm going to find the nobles. The next morning, I told Ryan. He was chewing on a piece of hardtack and nearly choked. "Find them for what?" "To negotiate a truce." "A truce?" His eyes went wide. "Are you insane? They want to tear you limb from limb." "I know." I stood up and looked out the window at the new flag flying over the city. "But if we keep killing, more people will die. The people of Blackstone, the people of Sam's Creek, all these people who have just stood up, they need time. Time without war." Ryan's mouth opened, but he was speechless. "The nobles want a truce too," I said. They're tired of fighting. They've lost enough. If I go now, they'll be willing to talk. But you're coming with me. He froze. Me? You're the hero. I looked at him. When a hero talks, they'll listen. More than they'll listen to me. He thought for a long time, then finally nodded. Okay, I'll go with you. The negotiations were held in a place called Peace Valley. A nice name, but everyone knew this valley had seen countless battles, had been soaked in blood time and time again. A dozen of the most powerful noble families from the north came to the talks. When they saw me, their faces went white. A few of them were physically shaking, but they all came because they knew that if they didn't talk now, they would lose everything. The negotiations lasted 3 days. The first day was nothing but accusations. They listed how many of their people I had killed. I listed how many of their people they had oppressed. It was a shouting match. The second day, we started talking terms. They wanted me to stop my attacks, to return the lands that had been taken. I said I could agree to a ceasefire, but the lands are not mine to give back. The people had taken them for themselves. On the third day, we were at a stalemate. An old noble slammed his fist on the table. By what right do those peasants occupy our land? I looked him in the eye and said slowly, by the right of not wanting to be peasants anymore. He was stunned. Your family's land was passed down from your ancestors. And how did your ancestors get it? They stole it. They tricked people for it. They killed for it. Whose land was it originally? It belonged to the common folk. Now they're taking it back. What's wrong with that? He couldn't answer. I stood up and looked at all of them. I know you're not happy about this, but you can't beat me. If we keep fighting, you will only lose more people and more land. If we stop now, you can at least keep what you have left. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Then someone stood up. I agreed to a truce. It was a young man, dressed in less opulent clothes than the others, clearly someone who had recently inherited his title. He looked at me, his expression complex. My father, you killed him, but he was a monster. I know that. He oppressed his people. I know that. I hate you for what you did, but I hate him more for making me live my entire life surrounded by that hatred. I watched him, saying nothing. Let's end this, he said. I don't want any more people to die. With one person breaking the dam, a second and a third followed. In the end, the truce was signed. The nobles recognized the autonomy of the commoners' territories. The commoners promised to cease their advance. They would exchange prisoners and respect the new borders. Ryan signed on behalf of the heroes. And I signed on behalf of what? On behalf of myself. On behalf of the people who had stood up. On behalf of a boy named Sam and his dream. On the way back, Ryan was silent. Halfway there, he suddenly stopped. Boss. When I signed that treaty today, I remembered something. What? He looked at me, a strange light in his eyes. The church used to teach us that the hero is chosen by destiny to save the world. But now I realize the world doesn't need me to save it. I waited for him to continue. The world just needs people to stop getting in the way of it saving itself. I looked at him, and for the second time, I smiled. You learn fast. He smiled back. I had a good teacher. When we returned to Blackstone, the news had already spread. The entire city was celebrating. They were drinking, dancing, singing, lighting bonfires that burned late into the night. I stood on the city wall, looking down at the celebration, and felt a strange sense of déjà vu. A long time ago, someone else had stood beside me, watching a similar scene. Back then, he had said, "Boss, look, they're so happy." And I had said, "Happy about what?" "They have to work tomorrow." He had just smiled, his eyes curving. "It's enough to be happy today. We'll worry about tomorrow when it comes." Now, the faces of the people below looked just like his had. They were smiling with such joy, as if tomorrow would never come. But tomorrow would come. And when it did, they would have to work and farm and maybe fight and struggle to survive. But today, they could be happy. And that was enough. Ryan came up and stood beside me. "What are you thinking about?" "Just someone I used to know." He didn't ask who, just stood there, watching the celebration with me. After a long time, he said quietly, "Boss." "Yeah. Have you thought about what you'll do now?" I turned to look at him. He was looking at me, his gaze serious. "The war is over. The nobles are staying put. The common folk are governing themselves. What's next for you?" I looked at the lights of the city below and thought for a long time. "I don't know." He was quiet for a moment, then he smiled. "Well, you can take your time thinking about it. You've had all the time in the world. I nodded. Yeah, all the time in the world. That night, I made another decision. I was going to take the husk of Sam back to Sam's Creek. The body that wore his clothes, that had his face, but whose eyes were empty. It shouldn't be following me around forever. He should be in a place that was named after him, where the people who remembered him could visit him. The next day, I took him to Sam's Creek. I sat him down under the old oak tree, with his back to his own grave. This way, he could always be looking at that small mound of earth, even if he couldn't see. But I knew the real Sam would be happy. As I was leaving, I stood at the edge of the village for a long time. The wind rustled the leaves of the old oak tree. I suddenly remembered the day Sam planted it. He dug the hole. I held the sapling. He filled the earth. I watered it. When we were done, he stood before it and said with great seriousness, little tree, grow up fast, so you can give the boss some shade." Back then, I thought we had so much time. So much time. Time for him to grow up, for the tree to grow up, for the world to get better. But time waits for no one. The tree was so tall now. But where was he? 10 years later, the hero, Ryan, stood before the ruins of the citadel. He was no longer the young, passionate boy he once was. At 35, there were lines on his face and silver in his hair. The hand that held his sword was not quite as steady, but his eyes were just as bright as they had been a decade ago. He was alone. The ruins were the same, but different. Saplings planted 10 years ago were now tall trees. Vines crawled over the broken walls, and wildflowers bloomed everywhere. He stepped inside. I was waiting for him. I was sitting on the same stone I'd sat on 10 years ago, sharpening a sword. It was Sam's sword, a plain iron blade, nothing special, but he had used it for years, and the hilt was worn smooth by his hands. "You came," I said, looking up. "I came." He stopped in front of me. 10 years had passed, but I hadn't changed. A demon king doesn't age. But something was different about me. He knew it. "Are you ready?" he asked. I put the sword away and stood up. "I'm ready." He drew his own sword. It was the Godslayer blade the church had given him all those years ago, said to be able to kill any immortal being. In 10 years, he had never once used it. Today was the first time it had been drawn from its sheath. We walked out of the ruins into the open clearing outside. The sun was bright, illuminating everything. On the distant hillside, smoke rose from the chimneys of Sam's Creek. The faint sound of bells from Blackstone echoed on the wind. All the people I'd saved, helped, and killed, they had all become the dust of this new world. "Why today?" he asked. I looked into the distance, not answering. He didn't press. He raised his sword. No grandstanding, no ceremony, no slogans about justice. Just two swords and two men who had to fight. The first strike, I parried. The second, he retreated. The third, we both lunged, clang. The sound of steel on steel echoed through the clearing. Then another strike and another. He used a style he had developed himself over the past decade. No forms, no techniques, just the simplest thrusts, slashes, and cuts. Every blow was aimed at me, yet every blow held something back. I used Sam's style. The kid never had any formal training, just swung his sword around wildly. But he was earnest. Every swing was full of intention, as if it was the most important thing in the world. Now, I used a style to fight his hero. Sunlight glinted off our blades. Sweat trickled down our faces. Our feet churned the grass, leaving circles in the earth, crushing wildflowers underfoot. We fought for a long time. So long that the sun moved from high noon to the western horizon. Finally, I lunged forward. He parried, and using my momentum, he thrust his own sword forward into my chest. It wasn't deep, but it was enough. I looked down at the blade, at the blood seeping from the wound, staining my clothes red. He didn't move, just held the sword, looking at me. "You let me," he said. I didn't answer. "That last attack, you could have hit me, but you didn't." I looked up at him and smiled. Getting old. My hand slipped. He didn't believe me, but he didn't ask again. He pulled the sword out. I stumbled and fell to one knee. Blood poured from my chest, pooling on the ground. He knelt down too, facing me. "Why?" he asked. I looked at the distant hillside, at the old oak tree and the two graves beneath it. One real, one empty. The tree's branches were full and lush, casting a wide, cool shadow. "Because I saw it," I said. He looked confused. "Saw what?" "That world." I looked at the smoke from the chimneys, at the figures of people working in the fields. The world where everyone is equal. It's not perfect yet, but it's close. I can see it. He followed my gaze and was silent for a moment. And that's it. That's it. He looked at me, his expression a storm of emotions. You could have lived. You could have stayed to watch it grow. I shook my head. It's enough, I said. I've watched for 10 years. It's enough. From now on, it's your turn to watch. He said nothing. I was losing a lot of blood. My vision started to blur. In the distance, it looked like a figure was walking toward me. A thin boy in a blue tunic, a smile on his face, his eyes curved into crescents. I blinked, trying to see clearly. The figure came closer and closer until he was kneeling in front of me. "Boss," he said. His voice was exactly the same as it had been all those years ago. And